hole in a donut.
Hey everyone, it's me, Mr. Green. So this week, something amazing happened. After a long-awaited 30 years, we finally got essentially new episodes of Batman the Animated Series, or rather it's the spiritual successor reboot, Batman Caped Crusader. Now, I was hesitating on reviewing a show like this. It's kind of too mainstream for me, but I'm seeing a lot of really bad takes out here from like haters and like political leaders and a lot of people who, in my opinion, don't know the first thing about Batman or anything they're talking about. And I want to review this show because I think it's freakishly inspired by the Adam West Batman show in a way I really wasn't expecting. And I know a lot of fake fans have never even seen that show, so I think I have some insight here that a lot of people don't. So yeah, I feel like I can do a better review of the show than most other people because I have seen all the animated Batman material, and I have seen all the film Batman material, and I've read a decent number of the comics. So yeah, I was told that the show was pretty much created to be a reboot of Batman the Animated Series, but Bruce Timm didn't want to do that and turned HBO Max down. But then they floated him like an alternative idea to do a full reboot of it his way, and he went for that. So yeah, this is basically Batman the Animated Series from the beginning all over again, but without the Fox Kids Network censors holding them back from them going full R-rated and X-rated with it. Now, the show is hilariously tailor-made for HBO Max, and that was doing gangbusters airing the Blu-ray restorations of Batman the Animated Series. But funny enough, because of insanely bad management choices by Warner Brothers Richford, David Zaslav, the show ended up airing in a dump on Amazon Prime, who bought it out. So yeah, I super wanted to see the show right away, but I didn't actually get around to it until a few days after it came out because I had to work and there were complications, and so eventually I got around to binging it and I had my time with it. Now, I'm going to try to give you guys a review of each episode, as well as I go through the show, I'm also going to try to review each of the characters that are in the show because I think that's kind of important. Batman kind of lives and dies on its characters. All right, so let's get into it. So I think what's taken everyone by surprise is that no one expected this to be a straight up retelling of Golden Age Batman, but that's essentially what it is. This is, for all intents and purposes, a very odd reboot. It's explicitly set in the late 1930s, early 1940s, and that mirrors Batman itself, beginning publication in 1939. Like, I want to say the original Batman the Animated Series wanted to do that, but swayed away from that so they could implement elements of the Tim Burton Batman movies, as well as like elements of like modern day, like the computers and cell phones. But this show's not doing that. It just straight up is the 1940s, and that's cool because it makes it more realistic than the fantasy world that Batman the Animated Series was in. So yeah, this leads to some pretty cool stuff. Like when you see the Batcave, it's just like full of like books and Tesla coils. And the main thing Batman reuses to track crime is a fucking glass board. And the reason he uses that is because that's the same glass board that Adam West used to use to track crime. Like, this is a pretty funky show. It's like a mix of the animated series, the first run of comics, but then it also draws from some other places, and I'll get into that later. Like, I'm kind of shocked at how much I do have to bring up the Adam West Batman show, though, because like the previous Burton version and the animated series version really wanted to like downplay the connection to that. But then again, like the Joel Schumacher movies are arguably like movie versions of the Adam West TV show. And I feel like this is at the very least taking the elements that worked from that show and reimagining them. All right, so let's get down to it. So yeah. Let's start this off, episode 1, Treacherous Waters. So the first episode introduces the Penguin and throws a major curve into the wrench of the show by letting us know that even though this is mostly an adaptation of Golden Age Batman, they're going to be screwing around with the interpretation of some of the characters. And right off the bat, in the first episode, we get Golden Age Batman. Now, I'm very fine with Golden Age Batman. I like Golden Age Batman. As well as we also get Golden Age Bruce Wayne. Now, I have nothing really to say for the most part because this feels like the same Batman from the animated series. However, it's not exactly the same. As I've watched more of the show, I've noticed that the Bruce Wayne persona is a little bit more awkward and a little bit more fake, which is cool. Like in the first episode, there's a particular interaction where he makes a joke about why he's wet to Barbara Gordon, and Barbara isn't amused, so he does it again to some other people to get a better reaction. I will say though, now that I've watched the whole show, This Batman is a little bit more imperfect than the animated series Batman was. Like, the animated series Batman was like completely and constantly always right. And this Batman can fuck up and can get hurt, which is interesting. They also seem to be teasing a little bit more that Batman is broken and mentally disturbed in this series, which I'm kind of into as well. All right, next up, I feel like I should mention Golden Age Alfred. Now, Golden Age Alfred, once again, I'm fine with that because I've seen the 40s comic books and I know that Alfred used to be a big fat guy, which is what we get here. But yeah, a lot of people haven't seen those comic books, so they're like, why is Alfred big and fat and has black hair? Like, this is the way Alfred was depicted until Batman 66. Like, most versions of Alfred are actually based on the actor from Batman 66, and that's kind of what they went with. Now, I'm also enjoying that this version of Alfred is not Batman's dad. He seems like he's torn between his loyalty to Bruce and his loyalty to the Wayne family. And he seems completely aware that his hands-off approach to raising Bruce made him turn into a more fucked up version of Batman. And I'd say he almost seems guilty about it, especially when we get into the Harley Quinn story in episode 3. But yeah, overall, what's interesting is if this series is set in the 1930s, you also have to consider that Bruce Wayne's parents probably died around 1910. Anyway, next up, at some point they dropped that Lucius Fox is in the show, and he seems to just be Bruce's attorney. I'm not even sure if he knows Bruce is Batman. I'm also not sure if he's making Batman's weapons like the Dark Knight. Honestly, they just dropped that Lucius Fox is in the show, and they haven't really alluded to what he actually does yet. Next up is Commissioner Gordon. Now, he's black. He was black in the most recent Matt Reeves Batman movie, too. I personally prefer the Gary Oldman Batman the Animated Series version of the character, but whatever. Overall, this is fine, and it doesn't really change anything about the character. Barbara Gordon, though, they changed a lot. I'm a little less keen on her because she is a completely different character from a lot of the previous versions. Like, in the animated series, Barbara was a red-haired college student who turned into Batgirl and eventually got a job as a librarian, pretty much in line with previous versions of her. This new Barbara for this show, completely different character. She's a Gotham DA. She's frequently put up against the show's corrupt version of Harvey Dent. She seems pretty old in age, like a lot older than her animated series version. I'm wondering if they made her that old just for the sake of shipping her with Bruce, because Bruce Timm has frequently shipped Batman and Batgirl together because that's just what he's into. I'm also wondering if the fact they did introduce her in episode 1 was a setup for the show doing Batgirl before Robin, which has happened before in the Batman due to the silly 1990s Bat embargo where they couldn't use certain characters at certain times. Anyway, overall, the new Barbara Gordon, pretty hard question mark for me as terms of what I think of her. I don't outright hate her, but also every recent Batgirl in like the past 10 years of media has been black lately, so I'm not shocked she's black. I think it's mostly that I don't like that she is such a different character from the previous BTAS Batgirl, though. I feel like if she had the same design, but was more that younger, optimistic character, I think I could like her more. But with this character, she's basically a completely new character. In fact, she's such a new character that I feel like her and the BTAS version could both exist in this world without clashing each other. Like they could be sisters or something. But this is a really completely new take on Barbara. And so far, I'm not sure how I feel about it. If I had to say anything nice about her, I'd say she reminds me of a more serious version of Hilary Banks from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And sometimes she's cute, but that's about it. All right, moving on back to the first episode. So yeah, the next biggest departure is the first episode reveal of the Penguin, who is now a big nightclub singer. And I have a bunch of thoughts on this. Now, the female Penguin is a major first things first controversy point for people getting into the show. So yeah, it's an initial gut punch to the stomach. Now, I don't hate this version because of the gender swap. I hate it because of the lack of care that went into it. Here's my rundown of thoughts on this one. Now, she's ugly because the Penguin is always ugly, but yeah, she's Wario ugly and there's no denying it. They just put the ugly Penguin's face on a female body. What's weird for me though is if you think about the Penguin, a lot of the previous Penguins have been 4 foot tall midgets. And I'm kind of shocked that this one went the opposite. She's a 9 foot tall absolute unit and what? What the hell is that? That doesn't add up to me. Was that just so she could fight Batman in a fist fight? Like, no offense, but like if I had been in charge of this, if we had to do a female penguin, I would say go with a shorter, cuter female penguin and like played into that. But that's just me. Also, the penguin is mostly supposed to rely on like gadgets, so I think it's stupid that they made her like a brawler, but okay, that's what they did. Probably the most interesting twist about the female penguin is she has 2 kids, so that makes her kind of like a stereotypical mob mama. I could see her one son eventually becoming a more comic accurate version of the penguin if she ever gets killed off, which was kind of similar to what happened in Gotham. In Gotham, like they really played up like the penguin's mom as like a crazy woman. I think the name Oswalda is completely stupid and kind of wish it had just been the penguin's mom from Gotham. I will say that in the end of the episode, I did like that they whipped out the giant umbrella on the boat, turning out to be a railgun. Like for an honest second, I thought they were going to do that Adam West thing where the penguin had a giant umbrella rocket. And essentially this is a version of that, but a little bit more realistic. But once again, the show is really throwing out some wild takes from the Adam West Batman series, just doing them slightly more seriously. And that's kind of baffling to me. So I don't know if anyone else knows this, but this episode has a super weird, super unsatisfying ending where the penguin blows up the police station, and then she seemingly gets away with it because Batman just gives up at this point. Batman doesn't stop her, and the police don't connect the dots either. So yeah, by all accounts, the penguin wins the first episode. What the fuck is up with that? Okay, on to episode 2. So episode 2 starts going more into detail about the GCPD, and we get some really prominent appearances by Renee Montoya and Bullock, and this new villain named Arnold Flass. He was apparently a long-standing corrupt cop from the comics. I think he was Gordon's corrupt partner from Batman Year One. So quick reacts to these guys. I actually like Flass a ton. I think they made him incredibly cool on the show. I think he's a totally unpredictable character, and he's probably one of my favorite characters for the season. Bullock, meanwhile, is really interesting for me. Now, I would probably define him as the character least changed from the Batman the Animated Series version. The only big difference is he has a mustache now, and I also feel like he has the exact same voice as his BTAS iteration, except now he's voiced by John DiMaggio instead of Robert Costanza, but somehow DiMaggio is doing the exact same voice as Costanza, so yeah, anyway, Bullock sounds exactly like he did in BTAS. The only major difference with the character of Bullock is, though, in this version, he's a fully corrupt goon cop, which was a major departure from the version on BTAS where people thought he was corrupt, but he actually wasn't. He was just a mean and downtrodden asshole, and everyone thought he was on the take, but he actually did always do the right thing. So I kind of like gotta wonder, like, will this version eventually do the right thing? I feel like I should also bring up the version again from the Gotham TV show who was corrupt, but only corrupt as a survival mechanism. He still would do the right thing in the end because his heart was in the right place. All the same, I'm like kind of surprised that this is the first time we've gotten a fully corrupt, fully evil version of Harvey Bullock, and I'm curious to see where the show's going with it. In the meantime, they keep using him as a punching bag for the first couple episodes, and I guess he deserves it for karma reasons. Oh yeah, and back to Montoya. She's seemingly the same character from where we left off with her in BTAS, but now she's got a realistic, chubby Latina body, which the internet is divided in terms of whether they're into it or not. I really think that comes down to your personal preference in women, so that's up to you, viewer. Like, there are a lot of curvy women in this show, and I think that's more realistic of real life, and that's great. A lot of people aren't into it, but I know they did this because one of the main criticism about the old Batman the Animated Series, and especially Justice League, was that almost every man and woman in that show had the same body silhouette, and people thought that was cheesy. So this show did the opposite in reaction to that, and that's kind of what we ended up with, and I'm okay with this. So in episode 2, they introduce ClayFace as a villain, and it's the Basil Carlo version. Now, I've had a lot of mixed feelings on this one. So this is the Golden Age ClayFace, and they're pretty much doing the Golden Age ClayFace origin story where he's just a straight-up serial killer with a gooey face. Now, I really like it when BTAS and the other Bruce Timm shows would do straight comic adaptations. So on that alone, I'm happy with this episode. Like, quite frankly, I think they need to do more episodes that are just straight adaptations of the comics. On the flip side, if I put that past me, like, if I'm being real, this version of ClayFace kind of sucks because he's literally just a guy with a gooey face. But I guess then again, like, the BTAS version was kind of OP with, like, the Mudman powers. And I guess I'm okay that they're doing the original version. I just gotta say that the original version is not that most compelling version, and once again lacks the overall madness and like pathos of BTAS ClayFace. All right, let's just move on to episode 3. So episode 3 introduces Catwoman. Now this episode was probably the biggest mindfuck for me because it's literally Golden Age Catwoman on a level that I just mentally wasn't prepared for. But the thing is, like, they present her as an absolute total joke. And I would say that this episode probably gets closest to the tone of an old Adam West Batman episode, which was just weird for me. Like, it was weird that Catwoman was a complete fucking joke and just became a supervillain mostly to screw around with Batman. Like, the fact she's just like this busybody, like socialite, like doing crimes, and the fact she has this irrational maid working for her, that is totally a trope from the old Adam West show. Like, most of the bad guys on the old Adam West show would have like a random like Uncle Arthur or like just a maid who would like time in with like, boy, you guys sure are idiots and all that. And that's exactly what this maid does here. Like, it's completely random that they seem to be doing Adam West in this Now, this episode's saving grace is that we start to get introduced to the new fascinating version of Harleen Quinzel for the show. And I really, really like the new Harley. Now, it's probably going to take me a bit to fully wrap my head around her. But in episode 3, I find her a really refreshing and fresh take on Harley. Especially because Harleen Quinzel as the Doctor has kind of been a footnote on Harley Quinn's evolutionary path. And this is the first time we get a real long look at her in a healthy state of mind. And that for me is interesting. Oh, also in this episode, they also introduce Eel O'Brien. This is the guy who would become Plastic Man. I'm not sure if he's going to become Plastic Man in this show. Right now, they're just using him as a random reporter, but I'm down with this and I'm interested in where he's going to go. Also, gotta give extra props to the music team in episode 3 because apparently they not only reference Catwoman's theme from the Batman, but also Catwoman's theme from Batman Returns in this episode, which is pretty effing cool. Now, episode 4 is probably one of the best episodes of the entire show for this first season. It's essentially a full episode of Batman versus the GCPD that we've never properly gotten in BTAS. Like, the closest thing was the episode in season 4 where it ended being like, what if Scarecrow nightmare scenario. Like, this is really cool because it's like referencing Batman Begins, it's referencing Batman Year One. And what makes this a fully fascinating episode is it also deals with Bullock and Flass as corrupt cops and throws them into the mix. That is actually a step away from Batman the Animated Series where the cops were always viewed as like absolutely correct. And now that we have corrupt cops, like that just makes the drama like so much juicier. So the corrupt cops end up unleashing FireBUG. Okay, quick note about FireBUG. The cops think he's Firefly, and the costume he's wearing looks like a dorkier version of BTAS Firefly. But by all accounts, he is FireBUG, a secondary minor fire-themed insect-themed character from the comics. Now, I'm also shocked that at the end of the episode, Bullock just straight up kills him, which is a major fascinating departure from BTAS because it establishes that even though Batman has a no-kill rule, the cops clearly don't. So that's a major, major change. Oh, also this episode, they start using Fleischer Studios' Lois Lane as an Easter egg, and at another point, they actually show her talking to Jimmy Olsen. I'm actually really excited because this technically means that if we ever see Metropolis in the show, that the Fleischer Superman is just out there. And that also means in a couple of years when this world gets into World War II, he's going to fight the Japanese. So I would love to see a non-racist, serious meditation on what that all means for this world. And I kind of hope Tim will get into it because I think he wants to. Now, episode 5 is probably one of my favorite episodes. And what I love about this one is how meta it is. So episode 5 fully unveils the series version of Harley Quinn. Now, it's a major departure from all previous versions that this Harley is a scary psychopath with a vendetta. If I'm being real, I do think they got into Harley going psycho too fast, and I would have preferred that they saved this for season 2, or they would have had a more like dramatic, life-ruining reason for her to go full supervillain. But aside from that, I do love this take on the character. Like, in the previous 1990s Batman the Animated Series, one thing that they were great about was taking a variety of corny characters from the 60s and the comics and re-justifying them as absolute terrifying serial killers, sometimes filled with pathos. Now, ironically, one of the only characters to not get this treatment was Harley, because she originated on the show as the Joker's hench girl. So in this case, we are now getting a full Batman the Animated Series reimagining of what Harley Quinn could be if she was taken to a full scary serial killer level of a Batman villain that she almost rightfully always should have been. And I'm completely here for that, especially with the comics and the films more recently giving us a completely shitty, extremely watered down version of Harley that doesn't even do crimes anymore. Like, fuck the anti-hero version of Harley. I want to see Harley doing crimes. And we are now getting a Harley that's like going to town, torturing millionaires, and like on the verge of killing people. And I'm here for that. I want to see the serial killer version of Harley get worse and get more dangerous. Now, we also get another quick callback to the Adam West series in that Harley ends up inadvertently creating the villain King Tut, who, okay, now King Tut's in the show. So maybe he'll come back in season 2 and do like some Egyptian-themed crimes. But yeah, that's also cool that crazy-ass Harley created King Tut. So yeah, I really like this new Harleen, and I really like this new Harley Quinn persona. Now, here's where I'm going to get into the bad parts of this. Now, I won't say this episode is perfect, and there are two things that really like fly afoul of me and kind of surprise me. Now, first things first, in this episode, they also come out of nowhere and establish that this version of Harley is just a straightforward lesbian, and they put her on a date with Renee Montoya. Now, I'm a bit flabbergasted at this point because up until this point, this show had been doing a pretty series-accurate rendition of America in the 1940s. And look, I want to preface this is that I have nothing against lesbians. I have lesbian friends. I have gay friends. And if you're a lesbian, I think you're awesome, and I hope you have a great life. But what's confusing is like, they put her and Renee Montoya on an openly gay date in famously pro-gay 1939. Like, I feel like that's hard for me to wrap my head around, like, because that's not like really doing like what the social situation was in the 30s. It's doing what the social situation is now, but just setting it in the 30s. And look, I've even seen like gay and lesbian stories set in the 30s before, but usually they point out that like people of that time were not accepting of like LGBT issues, and like gay people of that time had to like sneak around and be clever about it. So like, I feel like the show's kind of doing a disservice by having them being openly out and gay in the 30s when that wasn't the way the world was. It just looks historically wrong because it is. The other thing is that this is the first time we've got a full lesbian Harleen, and that seems like a major depiction of previous versions of Harley, who were mostly established to be straight at first or bi until they meet Poison Ivy. Like, that really threw me for a loop because, like, previous versions of Harley have been like so straight that they've like gone after Batman and Nightwing before. And so yeah, this full lesbian version is a little bit weird for me. Now, the only other thing that threw me off majorly, so at the end of the episode, Batman obviously destroys Harley's crimes and she falls off a cliff and everything. You know, that's the least she could do. She could fall off a cliff. But then they like kind of at first play off that it's ambiguous if she died or not. But then they undercut that line by having her send Montoya an "I love you, I miss you, I'll find you soon" payphone call, which is weird because like after I just saw her torture 5 guys and nearly kill Batman, I kind of don't feel sympathetic for her anymore. So like, why'd they do this? Like, I think they gave this character a pretty awesome arc for the first 3 episodes she was in, but I feel like by turning her into a full serial killer, that immediately stops any of her positive like character development. So now that she's gone negative, I wonder if they're going to fully end up shipping her with the Joker or not. And I think it'll probably take a while to get there, but they definitely can't avoid it considering like how much like the fans want to see Harley and the Joker team up. But I'm still really interested in where this character is going to grow into. Like, I did both like Harleen Quinzel and Harley Quinn, but I do feel like this episode was a little bit of a mess for taking her full psycho way too fast. All right, moving on to episode 6. Now, this episode, complete mindfuck. So they introduced Gentleman Ghost, and I don't like Gentleman Ghost. I think he's a corny character. They at least like did him with a little bit of like dignity, and like I thought for the whole episode that they were going to like reveal that Gentleman Ghost was just like this big con man. Like, I'm thinking he was doing like a Mysterio plot where like he's just using smoke and mirrors to deceive Batman. But the episode has a lot of red herring evidence, like the fact like he burns the money, but then it full ends up in the end that they whip out Papa Midnight from Hellblazer, and Gentleman Ghost is just a full honest-to-God ghost. Like, what the fuck? They're going paranormal this early with things? I'm kind of shocked they're going full paranormal this early in the show. I kind of thought they would hold off on doing that kind of stuff a little bit longer. Or if they were going to like go straight into the paranormal stuff, maybe they'd like have like a bigger story arc around it. Instead, they just kind of like tap on it. And I don't know, that's weird for me. All right, let's move on. Episode 7 was another episode fully focused on Barbara Gordon and the GCPD and people thinking there was a hit on Commissioner Gordon. But then it turned out it was actually on Barbara Gordon because a mafia guy she defended in court was sick of her and just wanted her dead. So the villain here is Onomatopoeia. Now, I think Onomatopoeia in this episode looked so effing cool. I think 1930s Onomatopoeia is probably one of the coolest depictions of him ever, at least from a stylistic choice. In the actual show, though, he's kind of weak and useless and very quickly defeated. So once again, I'm a bit dismayed that the show isn't focusing on the villain of the episode and is more focusing on the ongoing drama between Batman and the GCPD as they're trying to figure out the crime. Now, I did enjoy that this episode was basically a big argument between Barbara and Commissioner Gordon about the gray morality of defense attorneys and how they feel against the cops, especially in this show where the cops are corrupt. But the twist ending here that the hit was actually on Barbara was a little bit predictable because the guy doing it was a corrupt cop that we'd never seen before. And yeah, so since the guy barely had a name, it was a little bit easy to figure out that he was the guy behind it. Overall, the episode was a bit corny again, and I really wish they had done Onomatopoeia more justice. I just rewatched this for the review, and he literally just stands there while Batman beats up his goons. It's ridiculous. Now, episode 8 was the Nocturna episode. Now, this was a real head-scratcher. So in this one, Batman goes up against Nocturna. Wait, I thought the character's name was Lady Nocturne. Also, they just call her Natalia, but the episode's called Nocturna. Anyway, she's this like pretty cliche vampire lady, but for the sake of the show, they reimagined her as like a cheap but sexy Wednesday Addams knockoff. The thing is, though, they never really explain what the deal was with her powers. Like, why is she a vampire? Is she literally a vampire? Was she bit by Dracula? Like, her brother appears to be a mad scientist, but they're circus people, so is he really a mad scientist or is he just a cosplayer? Anyway, she's a fucking vampire and she eats other children. It's disgusting. They downplay it that she has some kind of soul-sucking energy vampire thing going on, and the children she all eats are analogs for the Robins. So that's a kind of fun Easter egg. Also, Dick Grayson here has his exact same design from Batman the Animated Series, so that's pretty cool. We also get the first animated appearance of Stephanie Brown, the fourth Robin, and a surprisingly good showing from Carrie Kelly, who basically saves Batman here with her like legendary slingshot skills. Also in this episode, there's a blink and you'll miss it cameo from this series version of Killer Croc, who looks like a middle form between the Batman the Animated Series Season 1 and Season 4 design, and that's kind of cool. Anyway, I like this episode because I felt like it might have been the closest to a BTAS filler episode, but I don't quite understand why Nocturna was a vampire with all the traditional vampire rules in play. At least Batman handled this episode really well, and I thought this episode probably had the best depiction of Batman. All right, moving on to episode 9 and 10. So I'm doing these episodes together because they're a two-parter about Two-Face. Do you see that I just said the word two twice? Ugh, cursed. All right, so I'm a bit taken back about what they did here because essentially they're giving us the same Two-Face story we saw in The Dark Knight, right down to the fact that he's got a severely wounded face, and the storyline only works because he dies before his face can heal or he can fix it. Now, they made Two-Face here kind of interesting. It's a different interpretation because he straight up got two personalities. Maybe they should have called him Two-Personality instead of Two-Face. Anyway, he's got this ugly personality, and the ugly personality actually seems to be the normal, nice guy Harvey, whereas the normal face Harvey is the over-the-top killer. Now, I'm kind of mixed on this because I guess it's cool for the show, and I guess we get a Two-Face that exists for 2 episodes, but I feel like they should have figured out a way to make Two-Face work as a reoccurring villain. But then again, maybe if they're doing the anti-hero version, it doesn't make sense that he becomes a mob boss, but he could still just be around there killing criminals. Anyway, we get dumped straight into the plotline that old Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent are old childhood friends. And I feel like in this show, this came completely out of nowhere because they didn't establish it earlier. I mean, they kind of mentioned it in the carnival episode, but what's off about it is overall, Bruce seems like he doesn't give a shit about Harvey. He just wants to expose the mob of Harvey's information. And considering how corrupt Harvey is in the show, I'm honestly kind of surprised that he and Bruce were ever friends. The other weird thing is that Batman basically cements a partnership not with Commissioner Gordon, but with Barbara Gordon. And I'm not really sure why he does that. Honestly, it feels like it's just because Bruce Timm is pulling that out of left field because he wants to ship them together again. It really doesn't add up as beneficial for Bruce unless Barbara somehow can illegally pull her dad's crime files. Like, all Barbara really can tell Bruce is like dirt on her dad, dirt on the police department, and like whatever she knows about the case she's on. It's not like with Commissioner Gordon where he like has access to like all the crime files. Now, the series ends on what should have been a pretty awesome callback to Batman the Animated Series, but then that is undercut by a way with a post-credits stinger that we will eventually get a season 2 with a Joker. Okay, so now that I've digested the whole season, $1 million question is, did I like it? And that's kind of a hard question. Like, I like the idea of it. Batman the Animated Series was extremely awesome for pulling extremely hard one-shot episodes. And somehow I think because this show is doing a serialized season, the format of that is a bit lost in the mud here. It's like every episode was about a villain of the week, but in this show, it's way downplayed and it's more focused on the ongoing Batman versus the GCPD drama without getting into the villain psychology or without giving like them even enough screen time to make them cool. Like, FireBUG and Onomatopoeia were basically cameos in their episode and got defeated before I could even like really appreciate them or like think to myself like what was cool about this version of them. Like, I would say the only episodes that do full justice to the villain were the ClayFace episode, but that episode, I didn't like it that much. The Catwoman episode, but that was super Adam West corny. The Harley Quinn episode, and I guess maybe the Nocturna episodes. But like, of those episodes, like, Catwoman is probably the only one that actually told a solid story about Catwoman, even if it was kind of campy. I almost would have said the Harley episode was the best episode in the series if it just had a more clear-cut ending and it had more of a build-up to why Harley went crazy. I really don't think the show can redeem her after she went full psychopath. Plus, now that they did establish the Joker is coming, I guess they are going to go into Psycho Harley next season, right? Otherwise, the season as a whole, like, the big bad of the season seemed to be, like, Detective Flass, which was completely unexpected, but when you think about it, like, the whole season was Flass and Bullock doing crimes, and then the last, like, action moment of the season is Batman finally taking down Flass and stopping him from killing Barbara. But even then, like, I don't actually know if he was actually taken down. All I know is that Batman really scared him, and maybe Gordon can arrest him for, like, trying to kill his daughter. I am kind of, like, bummed at the show in a couple of ways. Like, one thing that bummed me out is, like, Arkham just looked like a standard California hospital and not the Tim Burton insane Gotham death trap nightmare that I'm used to. Like, looking more into some things now that I'm done the series, apparently the overarching story of the season was relatively an adaptation of Batman Year One, except set in the 40s and mixed with a little bit more of Batman's like original stories. I'm overall glad the show exists. I did enjoy watching it, and I do think we need more series like Batman the Animated Series, but I definitely think the show kind of wasn't up to the level of pathos and like pure quality that the original Batman the Animated Series was at. Like, it's not even getting 100% out of its villains week to week, and I think that's something that they need to fix. I am optimistically curious that they can do a lot better in season 2, and I am going to keep watching the show because I want to see where it's going. I think one thing that might be mixing up the show and might be a big mistake is that the show doesn't have Paul Dini working on it. Paul Dini was a writer on the original Batman the Animated Series, and a lot of the absolute best episodes of the animated series were due to Paul Dini. Like, all those classic mic drop episodes like the Mr. Freeze origin or like Almost Got Him, those were all Dini's doing. Now, that being said, this new series is mostly written by Kevin Smith's best friend, Mark Bernardin, and that's kind of interesting. I think Mark is a really smart guy, and he seems to have a series writing credit for almost the entire show, which is another big departure from Batman the Animated Series, where every 4 or 5 episodes had a different writer, but nonetheless, the tone of the show was pretty consistent. I guess the best thing I can say is overall that I enjoyed Flask and Harley the most in terms of villains in the series. I also probably could have given Onomatopoeia more points if he had just done more in his episodes, but overall, the show has some real jankiness that I think needs to be ironed out going into the second season. All right, I think that's everything I need to say about season 1. So let me know what you guys thought. Did you like it? Where were you guys on the reinterpretations and the gender swaps and the race swaps of all the characters? Were you into that? Did you hate that? Did you think they could have been done better? Maybe Batman should have been Chinese. He was Chinese in the Batman. All right, anyway, thanks guys. Leave a comment. Good night.